You don't wake up one day brave, you wake up one day tired of hiding, and that shift is subtle, but it changes everything, because when you finally get exhausted from pretending, from shrinking, from editing your own truth so it fits other people's comfort, something in you says no more, and that's where courage starts. Not loud or dramatic, but quiet and steady, like a heartbeat you finally notice. And what most people don't realize is that vulnerability isn't spilling everything to everyone. It's choosing to be seen where it actually matters. It's saying, this is who I am, without knowing how it will land. And that feels terrifying, because we were taught that being accepted means being perfect. But the truth is, perfection is lonely. Connection only happens when you let people see the parts you think make you unlovable. And here's the wild part. Those parts are usually what make you human, and humans are wired for connection, not performance. So every time you choose to show up honestly, even when your voice shakes, you are rewiring yourself away from shame and toward belonging. Because shame thrives in silence and secrecy, but it collapses when you tell the truth out loud. And that's why the bravest thing you can do is not to have it all together, but to say, I don't, and I'm still here. And when you live like that, you stop chasing approval and start building alignment, which is when your life feels lighter, not because it's easy, but because it's real. And being real takes less energy than being fake. And that's why wholehearted people don't look fearless. They look open. They love without guarantees. They try without knowing the outcome. And they keep choosing authenticity over armor. And if you're listening to this right now wondering if you're enough, the answer isn't found in becoming someone else. It's found in coming home to yourself, because you don't belong when you fit in. You belong when you stand in your truth and say, this is me. And that's not weakness. That's the strongest move you'll ever make. You don't lose yourself all at once. You lose yourself in small moments, when you don't say what you mean, when you laugh at something that hurt, when you agree just to keep the peace. And over time, those tiny betrayals add up until you look in the mirror and don't recognize the person staring back. And that's when burnout hits, not because you did too much, but because you were too far from who you really are. And the path back isn't dramatic, it's honest. It's asking, what do I feel? And letting that answer exist without judgment, because emotions aren't problems to fix, they're messages to listen to. And when you start listening, you realize how much you've been carrying that was never meant to be yours. Expectations, comparisons, old stories about who you should be. And once you let those go, space opens up for something better, self-trust. And self-trust is the foundation of courage. Because when you trust yourself, you don't need everyone else to agree with you. You can walk into uncertainty without falling apart. And that's where real growth lives, not in comfort, but in curiosity, not in control, but in connection is. And every time you choose to stay present instead of numbing out, you're building a relationship with yourself that no one else can take away. And that relationship changes how you love, how you lead, how you live. Because when you're grounded in who you are, rejection doesn't destroy you. It just redirects you. And suddenly you're not asking, do they like me? You're asking, do I like how I'm showing up? And that question will change everything. You don't need to be louder to be powerful. You need to be truer, because real strength isn't about dominating a room. It's about standing in it without shrinking. And that takes way more courage than pretending you don't care. Because caring is risky. It means something matters. And when something matters, it can hurt. But that's also how it becomes meaningful. And a life without risk is a life without depth. It's safe, but it's hollow. And most people aren't afraid of failure. They're afraid of being seen failing, which is really just shame in disguise. And shame tells you to hide, to wait, to stay small until you're perfect. But perfect never shows up, so you end up waiting forever. And meanwhile, your real life is passing you by. So the bravest move is to start where you are, with what you have, even if it's messy, even if it's incomplete, because progress beats pretending every time. And when you let yourself be a beginner again, you open the door to growth, joy, and creativity. And creativity is just vulnerability with a vision. It's saying, I don't know exactly how this will go, but I'm willing to try. And that willingness is what builds confidence, not success, because confidence isn't knowing you'll win. It's knowing you'll survive if you don't. And once you get that, you stop being afraid of being seen. You start being excited about becoming. You don't heal by pretending the pain didn't happen. You heal by letting it be seen, because what we hide has power over us, and what we name starts to loosen its grip. And that's why telling your story, even quietly, even to just one safe person, is an act of rebellion against shame, because shame wants you isolated and silent. But connection pulls you back into your body, back into your life, and back into the truth that you were never meant to do this alone. And when you stop judging your own emotions and start meeting them with curiosity, something softens inside you. And that softness is not weakness. It's openness, and openness is where empathy, resilience, and love are born. And when you live open, you don't need to armor up all the time. You can let joy in without waiting for the other shoe to drop. You can trust yourself to handle whatever comes, and that trust changes the way you show up in relationships. You stop chasing people who don't see you and start choosing people who do. And that shift is quiet, but it's powerful, because your life starts to reflect the way you treat yourself. And when you treat yourself with compassion, everything else begins to follow. You don't have to prove your worth by being busy, exhausted, or endlessly productive, because hustle without alignment just turns into burnout with better branding. And a lot of us learned early that being loved meant being useful. So we keep overgiving, overworking, overextending, hoping someone will finally say you're enough. But the truth is you were enough before you did anything. And when you stop tying your value to performance, you start making choices from a place of self-respect instead of fear. And that's when boundaries stop feeling like rejection and start feeling like self-trust. Because every time you say no to what drains you, you say yes to what actually matters, and that clarity gives you back your energy, your creativity, and your joy. And joy isn't something you earn after you've suffered enough. It's something you allow when you believe you're worthy of it. And believing that is an act of courage in a world that profits from your self-doubt. You don't become whole by cutting off the parts of you that hurt. You become whole by welcoming them home, because healing isn't about fixing yourself, it's about understanding yourself. And the more you understand your patterns, your triggers, your fears, the less power they have over you. And that's when you stop reacting and start choosing. And choice is where freedom lives, because when you know why you do what you do, you can decide if you want to keep doing it. And that's how generational cycles end, not with blame, but with awareness. And awareness takes courage, because it means looking at your own story without flinching. But when you do, you realize that compassion for yourself makes it easier to have compassion for others. And that's how relationships become safer, deeper, and more honest. Not because everyone is perfect, but because everyone is trying. You don't need to have everything figured out to move forward. You just need to be willing to take the next honest step, because clarity doesn't come before action. It comes from action. And when you wait until you're certain, you stay stuck. But when you move while you're unsure, you learn who you are in real time. And that learning builds resilience, because resilience isn't about being unbreakable. It's about knowing how to get back up when life knocks you down. And every time you choose to try again, you're teaching your nervous system that you can survive discomfort. And that's huge, because most of our fear isn't about what will happen. It's about not trusting ourselves to handle what happens. And when that trust grows, anxiety loses its grip, and you start meeting the unknown with curiosity instead of dread. And that's when life starts feeling less like a threat and more like an adventure. You don't need to be extraordinary to be meaningful. You just need to be present, because presence is where connection lives, and connection is what makes life feel alive. And when you stop multitasking your way through your own existence and actually feel what you feel, you start noticing the small moments that were always there. The laughter, the quiet, the warmth of being understood. And those moments don't show up when you're numb. They show up when you're brave enough to stay open. And staying open is a choice you make over and over again, especially when it would be easier to shut down. But every time you choose openness, you're choosing a fuller life, one that isn't just about surviving, but about actually being here. And being here is where joy, love, and meaning all begin. You don't have to earn rest by burning yourself out first, because rest is not a reward, it's a requirement. And when you slow down long enough to listen to your body, you realize how much wisdom it's been trying to share, telling you when you're overwhelmed, when you're lonely, when you need to pause. And honoring those signals is an act of self-respect, not laziness. And the more you respect yourself, the less you tolerate situations that drain you. And that's how your standards rise, not because you think you're better than anyone else, but because you finally believe you're worth protecting. And that belief changes the way you show up in the world, because you're no longer begging for scraps of validation. You're creating a life that actually supports you.